I just so enjoy listening. Oh, hi, we're live. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to me.
Welcome everybody to Menorca Consciousness Group. We're going live with beautiful TJ from Luxor in Egypt. So thank you for everybody what's joining us today. We're going to be talking about part 2 of unraveling the threads of reality, if there is such a thing. So we're just going to bounce from one another regarding this change and the shift, etc., dimensions, ascension, whatever comes up. We've just decided to go with the flow and see where it takes us. So thank you for joining us, everybody. So just as we're making the introductions, I'd like to, again, I'm quite excited about this. So thank you so much for Tjoni for joining us. If it's okay, brilliant. If it's okay, Tjoni, I'd just like to, if you could tell us something about yourself and what's going on in your space.
Sure, absolutely. We're getting a little bit of feedback actually.
Oops.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your show. It was so lovely chatting to you on my show last week. So, tag teams. So, hi everyone, my name's Tjoni and I've been living in Luxor, Egypt for 3 years now. We escaped Alcatraz, as we say, when we left Australia. So my background is basically, somebody called me a paradigm architect once, and I kind of like that term. So I'm basically a connector of people, connecting people to themselves, to each other, to their businesses, to the universe, to everything through creative and wellness practices. So a few of those services or products, I guess you could say. One is a Spirit of Business I've been running, which is a workshop connecting people literally to the energetic blueprint of their business, to align with it and align with the ancestors, the earth, all the things. That's one of the smaller projects. One of the larger projects is more of a global network, which is Inspiral. And this is basically an intentional business community using ideas around intentional living communities in order to create collaborative business projects in service to each other and the earth and everything in between. So I'm kind of a multi-dimensional everything, just, I don't know, weird hippie from Egypt.
A weird hippie from Egypt.
Pardon?
Did you say a weird hippie from Egypt? Well, as you can see, everybody, there's going to be some laughter in this. Because we have a tendency, this is the joy of this change, isn't it? Because so many people, we know there's this massive awakening going on. And even what people refer to as the dark night of the soul, they're undergoing the process of clearing the baggage, so to speak, offloading, etc. And yet, I always, and I understand that and I respect it deeply, but I think we're guided by beings, whichever plane of existence or dimension we think they may or may not be on. And one of the underlying messages which they give us or send to us or try to inspire within us is to have that joy, is to feel the joy of this change and this transition and transformation. So as most people will see now, we have a tendency to laugh a lot. So the joy is here, and that's not disrespectful to what's going on the planet, where we know there's horrendous suffering and hate and pain and all sorts. That we carry that. I think humanity, we carry that as a whole and individually. So we can't say, okay, you know, I think the main thing is on the spiritual path is not to take ourselves too serious. And just lighten up a bit, because we have a tendency to kind of tighten up. And then we get more stressful when we're supposed to be doing the opposite, isn't it? So it's the laughter, I think, initially, what helps us enjoy the journey of whatever we're doing. But thank you so much for that introduction, Tjoni. Great.
My pleasure. Just to add to what I think, you know, to me, the joy is, it is the medicine and it is our armor. You know, like we are in a multi-dimensional spiritual war. That is the nature of things. And the, you know, the armory of, you know, whatever forces that are, forces there are that are trying to keep us down and keep us in enslavement, you know, they're relying on not only our fear, but our guilt and our terror and our sense of despair. They're reliant on all of those things. So, you know, it feels like our warfare is looking the beast squarely in the face, saying, okay, I see you, sending our hearts and our dear love out to the people that are suffering, and then going, okay, and now we still need to stay up and keep infusing the world with the higher energy, the higher vibration, which starves the proverbial beast. And we have to be present in order to be able to create something on the other side. So if we all fall into pits of despair, it doesn't help the people that have fallen. It doesn't make any difference to them.
Yeah, so, totally agree. Yeah, so definitely.
It's a real balance that we have to kind of stride to be the witness, but not to be bound by that reality at the same time. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we've got to detachment plays such a role in what we're saying. We can see and view, and energetically, I believe that we're connected to everything in this thread, if you like, in this reality, what we're trying to unravel. And in that interconnectedness, we feel that suffering. And we can't, it's almost like we can't go into a pit. If we go into the pit with them, I always think if somebody's in the pit, all we can do is stand at the pit and offer our hand, put our hand out to them and try and, you know, it's like, here, look, this is the offering. And because at some point we've all needed that hand. That's common for all of us. There's always been somebody what's offered us some kind of help and assistance and advice. More so, I have a tendency that spiritual guides do a lot more than what we realize and recognize, how they pick us up and raise us up. But if we was to go into the pit, it's likely the person in the pit will jump on our shoulders and use that as a means to get out. And if we're not strong enough, energetically, mentally, spiritually, we can end up being in that pit, and then we've got to start clearing the energies what's within there. So there's that constant, I agree, there's that constant balancing and that having that sense of detachment. And I don't mean in a cold way, because the word has got different connotations. I think when we recognize or have the realization of detachment within us, it's actually in somewhere in the core of it, we're exceptionally connected to what's going on. So it's almost a bit of a paradigm, really, because in that connectedness in our soul, that's when we're feeling the pain and suffering. And yet at the same time, exactly as you just described it, we've got to maintain our own light frequency and vibrations, because that's what's inspiring, you know, the environment around us, so to speak, whether it's people or energies around the environment. This whole transformation business is phenomenal, I think, because the more light each individual is shining, i.e. peeling those layers of delusions and baggage and, you know, the old stuff, what we were just talking about, and then that light shines, and then there's a multiplication factor to it. We know this, that it goes out, that infects somebody else, that infects somebody else, and it's this constant multiplication of light, which I believe is actually what's happening. This is the transformation of the planet at the moment. It's all connected to that almost alchemy of energies, transforming the old into the new. And like you were saying, I'd like to, if we can, just touch on that about letting go of the old, Tjoni.
Sure. Well, and even just to come back first to your, you know, your picture of the pit. I feel, for those of us who have the grace and good fortune to be able to separate ourselves somehow, and not be bound up in it. One of our first roles is, first of all, to say to people, hey, there's a pit here. Like, don't fall in it. Right? So that's the educational or adventure kind of aspect of what we're looking at. And then our chemical action is to then transform the landscape so there are no pits.
Yeah.
Right? So, and we can't do any of that when we're buried in the muck. But and as far as the detachment goes, we can't do our work from down there, but we do need to still be able to give ourselves time to grieve, I think. So I kind of feel that there is a wave that comes, and for me it's maybe once a month or once every couple of months that really the weight of it all will come into a huge, big, deep grief, and we kind of need that to go, okay, I am going to just jump in the pit, but I'm just going to go in there for a few hours and fall apart and just clear all the muck out so that I can get back and pull my boots back on and keep doing the work. So, being able to kind of distance ourselves enough that we can keep our oxygen mask on and keep being of service, but also just listen, and when it just gets too much, to be able to just fall into that for a bit. But just remember who we are and why we're here. We are here to help to heal this space and to help to shepherd humanity through to the next bit. And it's tough because we're still living in these very fragile human bodies and psyches. So we've got to manage that as well. So what are we letting go?
Everything.
To me, it's almost like, well, are we even going to know what we've let go? And before we hit the proverbial cliff, the proverbial precipice, right? So I've been feeling for quite some time that we've still got this long labor, this long birthing, basically. And now it feels like we're up to about 13 and a half months. So I'm feeling like January 2026, if we want to stick it on a timeline. Just my sense is that then we're going to have the flip of the uninversion of whatever this realm is. So to me, what we're letting go of is the entire fabric of our existence that we've been playing on for the last 6,000 to 8,000 years, which has been caught up in lack and struggle and greed and separation and stupidity, ignorance. Although ignorance is more of a choice, it's the disconnect from our own innate wisdom. So, because most of us still are, the disconnect from the various forces of creation that we're co-creating with to generate our own existence. We've been separated from that in that authoritarian kind of format of that there's something that's between us and the wisdom that's inherent in us. I mean, we are part of this world, we are part of this cosmos. Every cell in our being is, light years of age. Like, we are literally these incredible light bodies, and yet we're told to distrust them, and that it's a struggle, and we have to work hard just to stay in these avatars that we're inhabiting. But that's all a falsity. And I don't know if we can truly really sense, what is on the other side yet, because I feel like the shift is going to be so monumental that we can't imagine it, because we can only imagine out of our past experience. We can expand on our past experience a bit and say, well, what if? But really, if we're talking a completely new paradigm and completely new types of information that we're receiving, types of receptors in us that are waking up to be able to process that information, where does that leave us? You know, we're still imagining a world based on what we can see, based on the visible light waves bouncing off the wall and creating this vision in the dark part of our brain through these incredible processes. That's just a very tiny bit, even just a visual light information being processed down into a very basic, flat idea of what we're in. So when our other senses switch on, how can we even create some kind of construct of what we're moving into if we don't even know what senses and what we're truly capable of, right? So it's so huge. But I guess the crux of it is really, for me, it comes back down to the feeling. Well, what's the feeling? Just expansion and connection and joy. You know, to me, that's the most important bit, to bring us back to what that can be, so that we can keep maintaining that sense of joy and connectedness, so that whatever then new information comes in, we can align with the energetic juju of that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that.
I don't know.
It's like, okay, there's a lot in that. Let's start unraveling that lot now. There were so many pieces in there. Where do you start with this? Because and this is the journey, isn't it? There's so many aspects, what in and behind, on the surface initially, to what you've said, and you've just come up with some beautiful kind of threads, if you like, using the word threads, and leads as to what is really unraveling and how it may be, how existence may be once we've got over that threshold, so to speak. And I think my understanding is we can, in line with what you're saying, Tony, we can manage to get some kind of small glimpses of the possibilities of what may be in front of us, so to speak. Or and I'm using the time aspect there, but because we know it's just going to be anyway. But using that concept and going, okay, we've got glimpses. We can have small glimpses, and yet it's virtually impossible to be able to comprehend it with this awareness, what we've got at the moment. And it's only by that process of letting go of the old, making that space as things are removed from our awareness, this awareness, or this present awareness. And as things are taken out or dissolved or transformed, whichever way we perceive it, a space opens up. And in that space, we know we've got a slight greater sense of clarity. And in that clarity, that's where we get those glimpses of possibilities of where we're going. And I totally agree, absolutely. I just love the way you've just described that. In so much where that these senses, what we've got at the moment as sentient beings, is so small. It's not so much limited. I don't really want to use the word limited, but so almost minuscule without diminishing who we are as cosmic, radiations. And as we move through each experience and each moment, exactly again what you're saying, feeling our way through it, then it begins to unravel and unfold. And it's almost every moment becomes a joy when we perceive this shift in this way. I take my hat off to you for almost making a prediction for 2026 January. So I tend to be very cautious, but now you've chucked yours on the table, I'll chuck one in as well. It's very strange because I had this I thought to myself this morning, now am I going to mention next year or not? And it came in and I thought, okay, Let's see. And so now what you've almost, I don't know whether we can say we're always inspired. There's obviously several beams of light around this space at this minute as we're talking. So yeah, I perceive next year there's going to be a very, very significant event, 2025. And maybe that's in conjunction with the 2026. But in 2023, and I'm I'm ticking away thinking, I'm aware we're live here at the minute, but I'm still going to say it.
There's no editing.
There's no editing out on this, guys. So I think, yeah, I can safely say in 2023, I was made aware from whoever those wisdom beings, I'm going to say, which sounds elevating, but I don't mean it in that respect. But 2025, they was informing me there's going to be a very significant event in 2025, because I remember moving towards 2023 and going towards 2024. There's a lot of, because of obviously all the different events taking place, and there's like, right, 2024 is going to be major. And I remember sitting thinking, every time I heard it, it was like, guys, there's going to be ripples, but there's not a major event coming in 2024. And I had that going in. That was in 2023, and it was like, it's this one, the one I'm concerned with, or not. Maybe concern is there, but the one I'm very conscious and made aware of is 2025. I haven't got a clue what that will be. It could be on the same lines as COVID, where there's a lockdown, or there's, it has some kind of effect. I'm open and praying it's not. But at the same time, if there is, then it will probably create a new wave of awakenings on the planet, which is needed anyway. We know that's needed. And if it takes an event of that nature to create that next wave of spiritual awakenings for those what are not consciously on the path, so to speak, and I say that profoundly respectful to them, and that could be the indicator to what you're saying in January 2026 then, Tony. It's almost like, as we're unraveling it in one respect, new pieces are coming together, and we're starting to see the new fabric, so to speak. So
it almost feels like a it really needs to do that complete wash away of everything before we can start rebuilding. So, in my system, I am still feeling that we do have a lot more undoing of structure, and we. I've got about 5,000 thoughts all trying to make their way into one sentence.
Quick, talk them out here.
All the threads are weaving at once. And so, yeah, those major events I feel are going to still keep coming. I have a feeling, uneducated feeling that disclosure might be something to do with that, because that will really flip most people's minds upside down about our origins and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And that would undo so much of the current narrative. So there has been a lot of talk in certain circles about disclosure happening next year. That might be it. It could be a lot of things, but I certainly feel like humanity in general is still bound by old patterns too much to really be able to step into the new yet. So, for us here, so much of our work is exploring new ways of working and creating and being together, so that when the proverbial stranglehold has been released, that those situations or those scenarios, those processes, those relationships are already in place so that we can hit the ground running. And I think that's what we're going to need to do. I feel like this is definitely a time of process, because so many people and organizations I know all over the world that have all been doing the good work, trying to create different scenarios of betterment for people on various levels. Nearly all of them have had promises and promises and promises of, financial support and so on for months, years, decades.
Yeah.
And there's no lack of resources. It's just the gate has been held closed.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's coincidence. I think that there's some energetic holding pattern still in place that is halting that. But when the time is right, when the frequency is right, when our evolution as a collective is right, I feel like the floodgates will open. And if we don't know what to do with all of that resource, we're just going to start recreating what we did before.
Yeah.
And we're going to fall down, or we're just going to drown under it because we're not going to know how to structure things properly. So, there's part of the letting go is trying to get out of the left brain of needing to dream and plan and do and complete in some kind of linear time, because we think that we need to work in these timelines, and we keep structuring all of our things in these timelines, but it's not. It's just a big plate of spaghetti and we can't control it.
Totally,
And I think you mentioned time before, and I think time is one of the major constructs that's going to collapse.
Yes.
And once we're not functioning in that structure of time so much, again, our entire process of generating is going to shift, and our entire relationship to ourselves and each other is going to shift. So if we don't have time as a holding construct or a holding kind of pattern, then we start to function and awaken and feed and exercise and all of the things in tune with our bodies and in tune with whatever patterns and cycles are affecting us that are not on these little clocks.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll find then the same happens with the way that we do business and things like that. I mean, here everything runs on Egyptian time. I've heard people in other countries talking about like rubber time, like in a lot of the African countries, and they're not on the watch. It's rubber time, and so it's incredibly difficult and frustrating when we're trying to function in the Western paradigm still.
Yes.
Trying to get things done here when tomorrow, bokra, tomorrow might mean days or weeks or months or years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I've got to confess, I've got to word this correctly, I suppose. I don't pay much heed to this timeline, to the timelines aspect. For some reason, I can't attune to them when people refer to timelines, and I get it to a certain point. But it's something what doesn't really come into my periphery of awareness. It's because of the constrictions of it. My understanding of time is that it's deeply embedded into the 3D or third dimensional construct, and therefore it's deeply ingrained in the psyche, in the human psyche, at the moment, as it stands at the moment. And like you say, especially in the Western world or so-called developing and developed nations, they function on it, and that's part of that machine of materialistic energy. Keeps saying it, everything's about that time. You've got to be, go. My understanding of time is it's merely a frequency, and our awareness attunes to it, or when our awareness attunes to that frequency of that linear aspect, that's time itself, then that's where we're in trouble. And that's where the stress and suffering is created. I've got to be here by this time. I've got to do this by this time, etc., etc. So that lowers our frequency of awareness. That brings us into the density of the 3D reality and contains us if we allow it to govern us. I have a tendency, I'm absolutely terrible. I've always been terrible with time. Terrible. It's like somebody say, what time are we starting? I go, Chico time. I shouldn't say this, but I've turned up on jobs at you know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I should have been there at 7 in the morning. And then he's gone, what time do you call this? And I've said Chico time, because I've had that kind of independent, rebellious spirit, I suppose, not thinking it at the time, looking back at it, where it's like, no, I can't allow anybody to govern this energy. So there's a defensive mechanism going on there. And when we look at the timelines and this time, the shifting, I think we can just forget it. And going back to another aspect, what you were saying about letting go, I think everything we know up to 2 seconds ago, we just need to let go of it, because it's no longer saving us. And it's definitely not going to save us, because we're just still hanging on to the thoughts and feelings of the past and everything connected to the past. And that's where we're shackled in these chains of density. And I think it's correct on one level, that evolution is dictated and determined, the cosmos, if you like, has determined that we go through this path, we walk this path exactly where we are at the moment, so that when we transform all this, you know, all these energies, and we're in that what we think is going to be whatever it's going to be in the future, we're never going to come back to this place again, because it'll be totally transformed and dissolved. So then we're looking at, well, what are we going to let go of? Well, everything we understand as reality, from institutions, organizations, and whatever system. We can even step onto the banking system, the military system, the religious system, you know, these factors, what's been governing the world. I have an acceptance that that's the way it's been, and it's served its purpose for whatever reason, on all these, you know, levels it's occurred, whether it's been to contain humanity and enslave it or not. In a way, I believe we've chosen it all together as a collective source of beings of light, and we've gone, this is where we are. We need to get into that density, put our souls into that space, in the physical, use the physical body as a vehicle to move around, and unfold that light, and let's get it generated now, because the time is now. The cosmos is dictating, this is a cosmic event. It's happening in different realms, different dimensions, different planets and planetary systems, and therefore we go, okay, what do I need to let go of? Everything. What do you mean everything? Every single thing, every emotion you've got at the moment, every thought you've got at the moment, because that will give us the clarity, and having that clarity, it's just like emptying the room in the house, isn't it? You know, we have every so often, spring cleaning is classic, isn't it? Oh, why do we wait till spring to clean the house? It's like, let's do it every day. Let's clear this, and the space around us, our field of energy of who we are, and whether we refer to it as energies, particles, atoms, thoughts, emotions, goes back to what you were saying earlier. In a way, we can't really comprehend what it is at the moment and what it will be like in the future. All I believe in is clarity, clear mind, clear light, and emptiness. That's the emptiness of awareness is the most important thing, because in that emptiness, we're no longer attached and grasping these material aspects, what has been presented to us, the cars, the homes, the fancy stuff, all, you know, and because we've lost sight of our relation to nature itself, the vibrations of the trees and the plants, and all these beautiful spiritual beings. What, you know, there isn't a veil as such. We think we understand the veil between worlds and dimensions as a previous construct again. So it's kind of like saying, okay, with a clear light, we can see other beings walking around us. We can communicate with them. Right now, they wish to be communicating with it, and especially at this moment in time in evolution on the planet, because we can almost imagine a scene where the world itself is blissfully surrounded by cosmic beings and beings of light, whatever we refer to them as, helping and assisting us with this phenomenal change. And together, when our minds are merged with theirs, and we can embrace their wisdom and their intellect, that raises us up. That helps us even further. So we've got these kind of, all these layers after layer after layer, infinite layers, and on each layer, there's all these fractals, all these small facets of cosmic awareness, which is like, okay, we've got to just enjoy this because this is phenomenal stuff going on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, there's two points back on. The first is the notion of time, and I really do feel like that's probably the ultimate shackle, right? Because the idea of linear time, and I want to differentiate my ideas of linear time versus timelines, because to me they're two very different constructs.
Yeah.
So for me, linear time is what we've bound to as the animalistic part of our density of nature, because we're required to open ourselves out into this thing that is a baby at one end and a skeleton in the other in order to have this density of physical growth. But that's just the animalistic part of us. The part of us that, you know, I have a sense that we have been spliced and diced with genetically with beings from, you know, that are not of this density. And so that to me is the part of us that has these other senses and this other way of creating that is not bound in this density of timeline. The idea of a linear timeline, it gives us a sense of limitation and something that is finite that will run out.
Yes.
And you know, if we're functioning outside of that, and if the interfaces that we can use to relate to different forms of information are not bound as they are currently, then we can more easily communicate with all of the parts of us that are not bound by time. We might call them ghosts or spirits or things like that. They're simply us that's just not in this bit of time, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, you know, so there's that you know, everything is limited and yet we're not. And so that sense of limitation then feeds into every aspect of our world, because we're all bound by this finite little bit of life. And we are infinite and expansive. And there was another thing that you just pointed to in your last couple of sentences that I wanted to jump on as well. And I think it's gone, and I'm going to have to come back to it.
Beings of light around the planet.
The beings of light around the planet.
Something of that nature.
It's gone.
Yeah. It'll come back.
I have to write things down, or they just like disappear.
I'm the same. Yeah. It's funny because we're touching on, in a way, then what we're looking at is that finite and infinite. And again, it's the brilliant stuff in it, because it's duality again, polarity, finite and infinite. And I think they're dissolving. Everything to do with polarity obviously is going to be dissolved completely. For the singularity of oneness, the oneness of who we are collectively, in the most beautiful, magical, celestial manner, where in that oneness, we would then start functioning as pure, and I'm kind of emphasizing this word in a way, intuition. Pure intuition, where that first thought is correct. So we have that first thought, we think it's correct, we then sense that it's in harmony with our heart center, if you like, and feeling it, and then it goes straight into action very rapidly. First thought, first feeling, action. And I think in that duality, that dissolving of duality, because we've seen the division it's caused. You know, my opinion is correct, your opinion is wrong, etc. And the list is endless, you know. And it's like, okay, when we get to that point of singularity, and I don't mean singularity as AI, I don't mean that. I clearly want to state that one. I'm making reference to the singularity of ourselves as individual authentic beings in a collective manner, where we're almost like a hive consciousness, that we are unique in our own form. And I'm loosely saying we're using the word unique, because I don't, you know, I know people can jump on that word. You're not unique. I don't mean in that sense, but independent in our own sovereign space, if you like, yet deeply connected into the collective and attuned to the collective, in so much that maybe in the future that one thought, what's on the planet, will be picked up and sensed by every being on the planet, you know, and there'll be some kind of, pardon?
I think that is the case. I mean, our thoughts are things, and they do infiltrate every iota of space.
Yeah.
But also, I did remember what I was going to mention too earlier.
I was waffling until you got it back.
Yeah, thanks. Good waffle. So I was also thinking about the various densities and how in general our five senses only pick up such a minute amount of that, and when we are able to expand our awareness more to be able to pick up on those beings more easily that aren't sitting in the same dense frequency as these bodies. You know, so many of like the tribal cultures, they haven't been bound by these Western ideas, and the way that they can travel, the way that they can live without food and water, the way that they can exist in other spaces while their bodies are in a hibernation. I remember my friend, for instance, in Australia, he was working at one of the Aboriginal missions in Central Australia. And, you know, Australia is big. It's 3,500 kilometres wide and around about the same tall. So it's a really big space, and most of it's just desert. So, you know, travel, it's not like Europe or something where everything's close by. But the Indigenous people that weren't touched by Westernizations, they could travel. Like they were incredible, and still to this day. So he was staying with one family, and they had two family members who were on the east coast. So that's 1,500, 2,000 kilometers away, and they came to stay with the family for something like a week. They were living with them, and then they left. They'd done the work that they had to do, and it wasn't until they'd left that he found out that their bodies were still in the Northern Rivers area. They never actually physically travelled.
Yeah.
And that's just normal for them. And one of the other things I see is things like, my world has been, lots of dance and creativity and art and like all of that kind of stuff. I love dance. And I remember seeing some African dancers, they were doing hip hop in Australia. And one guy on concrete, he did a back somersault and landed on his head, balancing in a handstand, right? Just upright on his head. And that was just part of the dance, and then he kept going. And I was like, my jaw just dropped. I'm like, how is that even possible without completely cracking your skull open? Yeah. And when you see them dancing in their natural essence, it's almost like they're stringed up by a piece of string, and their bodies are just moving and without weight. It's like they don't have the same agreements with gravity that we do. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I studied African dance for years and years, and it just never ceased to amaze me just what they could actually do with their bodies. I just feel like, as we lose our hold on what we think is possible, and I think this is one of the key things actually. What do we need to let go of? What we think is actually possible.
Yes.
Because then we're limitless, and we see in so many different art forms, the idea of standing on the shoulders of giants, the leaps in the level of skill that I've seen just in the last 10 years has been mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And it's just spiraling out and out, like the level of growth and evolution of these things is just out of control. Yeah. So the things that I used to be quite proficient at, I see people 10 years later, I'm like, I have no idea what they're doing and how they're doing it. No clue.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I think you've just touched on a good point there. You've just reminded me, or kind of inspired a thought to come back up again, which is the attachment of the mind to the body. This attachment, what we have. And I don't know, I need to word this correctly. I think and I believe that as this process, this shift in expansion and ascension continues, it's clear we're losing the sense, the deeply ingrained sense of attachment within to the body, to the physical atoms and particles. Again, that's another aspect what's been holding us back. We've always heard of it's mind over matter, you know. That has always, and in a way, for some people, it's been a mystery. It's like, well, what do you mean it's mind over matter? And there you've just made a reference to a classic example of what it means, that we are so attached to the physical body, innocently from our own side, because it's just felt normal to us to be whatever it is. I mean, it's funny. Pardon?
It's what we've been sold.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and that's the innocence, isn't it? Because it's innocent in a way. We're being innocent to it, but at the same time, that's been actually encouraged. You know, by you know, minds or whatever, for whatever intention there is, which we can say for another one. Anyway, so I'm just wondering, brilliant. So just to everybody who's watching, thank you so much. I know we've got some questions and thoughts, so if it's okay, there we go. We'd just like to put them up then. If you're all right with this, let's have a look at some of these questions and views, Tony, if that's okay. So do you feel that people need to be reminded of their own power to save the cosmic waves and to let go of that which needs to be dissolved without fear of the unknown, which is unfolding, whilst further awareness and clarity is realized? That's from Susan Townsend. Thank you so much, Sue, for your question. So, one for you then, Tony.
Well, yeah, beautiful question. Thank you. My sense is that coming back to the self, coming back to that joy that we were talking about at the very start, coming back to the parts of our self and the parts of our experience that do uplift us. To me, just like tuning into the internal energy of that, the internal sensation of that, is probably the most important thing. Like that is our own power. Our own power is literally feeding the thoughts that then feed the positive energy within us. And so then the unknown, it doesn't matter, because the unknown are simply maybe the facts and figures and fragments of reality out there that can or cannot come in and infiltrate us. So, you know, the mind over matter, as you just brought up before, Colin, to me is probably, you know, one of the key aspects of just not knowing what's out there. And I have no clue what we're in. All I know is what thoughts and actions are helpful for me to stay whole. And the key to that is, if I feel expanded within that, I'm probably on the right track. As soon as I feel contraction coming in, then I feel like I'm off track. So the information itself feels less important to me than my energy and how I respond to it.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Pardon?
What's your thought?
Mine. Well, do people feel? Do you feel that people need to be reminded? I think. Thank you for putting it back up. Of their own power. I think what happens is, as we, as the light individually and collectively continues to emanate and be transmitted into this space, this environment we call the earth or the earth plane, that's naturally inspiring people to recognize their own power, so to speak. And I think what we do, even subconsciously, maybe often without realizing we're actually doing it, which sometimes is probably the best thing anyway, that maybe we each inspire in that essence of being present somewhere, another soul or another light to do what they feel is necessary or required. And when we do it in that way, I absolutely love it, because it's naturally flowing. This is nature, and the nature of frequencies moving in their own form. And the reason why I love it is because the ego is not involved in it. The ego is no longer saying, I'm going to help this people or this person, or I help them, or in this. And it's the ego and the I is kicking in. So when it happens naturally, the I is not present. So this is, for me, a beautiful way of how we maybe just reflect, or subconsciously, without being conscious, that there's an inspiration there what people can pick up on. Maybe like this conversation now, you know, at some point somebody's going to be watching the conversation, and yourself and myself, Tony, we've just gone, okay, let's just have a chat and let's go live, you know, for whatever reason. And yet it's possibly going to do exactly what Sue's referring to here. It's going to empower somebody, or they're going to feel it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't have it all together. We don't have all the answers. We're just living in the mystery. But it's like, okay, we're fine. It's perfect in that.
Yeah. I think sorry. Yeah, I think the big one, along with what Sue was saying, what she mentioned, I think that this letting go, the letting go aspect is like we were saying at the very beginning. I think there's an handful of huge aspects what we can perceive at the moment. We know there's so many on hidden levels and frequencies of awareness what we can't see. So they're probably the major ones. But consciously, the ones we're seeing, letting go is probably one of the big five what's on the planet at the moment. And time is one of them as well. Moving beyond the concept of time, but the letting go aspect and the healing, what's behind it and involved in it and at the center point of it, for me is phenomenal. And I absolutely, the feeling I have inside is indescribable when I think of the healing aspect of the letting go. And I've got to be cautious in what I'm saying, because there's a part of me consciously on one frequency of awareness where I don't, and I know this is controversial. Sorry. Somebody's trying to stop me from speaking. I'm still going to say it. There's a part of me, I don't even believe that there's any such thing as healing. Even though, and the reason why I know it's controversial and cautious saying it, even though I know where there's pain and suffering and there's light, the light is healing that pain and suffering, you know, but physically, mentally, emotionally. And I get the whole concept of it. But I think there's something even more, way beyond the healing aspect, what's taking place. And we're using this terminology, which we're running out of terms to describe what's really going on. We could say, well, everything, if everything just is, and we accept everything as it just is, then everything's in perfect order with the cosmos. But we need to see it from that cosmic perspective. It's when our mind is tripping some of these frequencies, and we go, okay, this is healing, this is, and we start labeling and terming everything. So it's a bit of a paradigm, because on the one hand, I'm kind of saying, well, okay, I get what healing is, and totally 100% agree with it, and recognize it big time, because I've experienced, you know, on so many levels and deeply, profoundly. And yet at the same time, I'm moving beyond the concept of healing to say, okay, it really is what it is, and really we're just evolving. We're trying to describe something with human language again.
And that comes back to something that I didn't quite get to finish before, because I got sidetracked. When I was talking about the difference between linear time versus timelines.
Yes.
And the idea of the timelines of like every single potential that we have exists in some other timeline, and those endless timelines we can tune in and align with any of those. And when we're doing that and we truly understand the nature of that from my perspective, then we don't need to do the healing, because we're simply moving over to the bit where we are well anyway.
Yes.
And so then it simply becomes a matter of choice. But because we've been bound in this idea of the drudgery and the, you know, needing to do all the deep work and hang out in the muck and do the dark night of the soul umpteen times, we're kind of bound in these kind of patterns. But I think part of our ultimate evolution and part of our letting go of the more animalistic, dense part of ourselves includes letting go of the adherence to this one path that we've been on.
Yes. Yeah.
And the people that I know that are like manifestors, for want of a better word, you know, they find it easy because then they're not having to generate material goods. They're simply moving to the timeline where it exists anyway. And they're not needing to heal their bodies because they're just shifting to the body where they just were always well anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
And but then that there's some responsibility in that can kind of be scary, because our experience then literally is following our thoughts at any time, and so we don't have any solid kind of cohesion. So we need to be mindful of our inner world all the time. Sorry.
On that note, we've got about 4 minutes left, if that's okay.
Sure.
And then we'll get wrapped up. So if anybody's got any more questions they'd like to ask us, Kim, I'm working on helping others out of the pit without ending in the pit myself. I need to work on that detachment and not jeopardizing myself. Brilliant comment, Kim. Tjoni.
Well, I feel like we just touched on that before. You know, we need to just lead by example, and so we can't put our hands in the pit and draw somebody out for several reasons. One is we will end up getting pulled in ourselves. We need to put our own oxygen mask on ourselves and just remain there as beacons of light to inspire other people to be able to crawl out themselves. Otherwise, we end up creating binds, and they're bound to us. And, you know, we have a piece of rope, and if they decide to jump back in the pit, it's like, okay.
We're back in with you.
So to me, that's not our job. It's not our job to pull them out. It's our job to remain examples of how they can pull themselves out.
And that inspires them to come out themselves. Brilliant. Love it.
And then they're self-sufficient and self-empowered. They become their own beacons of light. Which
we all need, don't we? We all just need it.
Hey, Amina.
There she is.
Hello. Sorry, I keep calling you Amina.
How has this ability to manifest played out in your loves? In your loves or your lives? I can't touch what I can't go anywhere near my loves, so I'll presume it's live.
Well, okay. So one key aspect of that actually is when I'm not attached to Lysia. Thank you. When we're not attached to the outcomes and attached to the struggle, I find things come super easily. One example is when I was in Bali, and I found in Bali the connection between a thought and it coming into our reality was super, like, lightning fast. And so I was working with a company there, and I was organizing all of the activities for the staff. And so all the wellness activities and creative activities and stuff like that. And, you know, things would happen, like I'd think, I really have a Kundalini yoga teacher to come and teach our staff. And meanwhile, like, some woman would be coming to me, and before I'd even had the thought, she'd be like, hi, what are you guys doing here? You look really interesting. I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher, and I've got some like, it was this kind of thing, right? Of just the random daydreaming, oh, wouldn't it be nice kind of thoughts. that don't have any tension, they just come in so easily. And now, you know, being here in Luxor, since we've decided to create, you know, the start of a community here, well, all of a sudden the spaces are coming in so easily, and the people are coming in so easily, and you know, everything's just, it's like the angel mechanics of the universe that are just bringing all of the different ingredients that we need. They're all busy at work.
Yeah.
They're busy at work, bringing everything to us, so we don't have to.
Yeah.
So we don't have to struggle so hard. So we take the action of our intent, and we do the little actions to help build those dreams, and then let the universe do the rest of it.
Love it.
That's how I found it.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Yeah, I have, where manifestation is, I never really use it. I've got to confess, I never consciously use anything to do with manifestation. I have a tendency that if we let go of all sense of control, the universe and cosmos will present it. That is it. I think the biggest issue humanity's got at this moment is that grasping and need of control. And from my own personal experience from day one was, and it was the lesson what was in this. In fact, it wasn't even a lesson, it was just the knowledge and eventually the knowing of it. That our big issue is controlling. We've got on so many subtle levels within our being. And once that control is gone, and I mean kind of dissolve completely in its space, because obviously there's a space open up, in that clear space is acceptance. And when we move with acceptance, we know the light has got its pure intentions anyway. That's already kind of emitting its own signals. And in that, what's meant for us will be placed directly in front of us and ripen and arise in front of it as and when we need it. Exactly as you've just described it, almost the same, Tony, where, you know, I need somebody to teach Kundalini, and there she is just floating by. It's like, you know, it's like I haven't intentionally gone looking for it, you know, because I think, on a footnote, I think even intention is an interesting concept, what maybe we can discuss on another occasion. Because I think that word itself, intention and manifestation, and possibly even the word creative and creativity, they're subjects what really need opening up and unraveling, I think, for us to have a look at and dive deeper into it. But anyway, so
maybe we can do a deep dive in that. But just quickly, I'm going to just have one extra question on how to resolve how to release the tension, and very briefly a couple of things that I do on that. One is any of the exercises such as Psyche and things like that to balance out the left and right side of the brain, because I feel a lot of the tension comes from that left side direction, need to try and figure things out. So, you know, there's the cross crawl that I showed under actually, and a few different things like that. Anything that we can do to balance out the brain. Some of the other stuff, I find the ancestral work is just so incredibly important, because they're still keeping us bound to those old conditions. So even all the subconscious work we do to be able to unravel all of that stuff, if they are still holding us in place, it's going to keep on creating that tension. So yeah, as far as processes go, I tend to find Psyche is really quite helpful in that. Yeah, that's just a couple of quick things, but we can definitely do a deep dive in that kind of
brilliant. Just quickly, if I may add to that, Tony, before we wrap up, how can we clear the tension? Stillness. Stillness is the key. Stillness is the key, possibly, to the new horizons, as we may say. But stillness, we know when we meditate, initially, within them first few moments, just by meditating, whether it's a visualization or focusing our concentration, etc., we can sense the body almost drop slightly, and that's a release of pressure and tension. When we go deeper with it and enter the stillness within. And that's a journey on its own. So, you know, it's kind of training the mind to get into that pure stillness. There's tension doesn't exist. The other way we can do it is just do an ascending meditation, send our awareness up through the crown chakra and just out into those planes. That basically expands the consciousness, lets us have that space without tension. And also, when we're coming back, when we're bringing our mind, our conscious awareness back, we're actually bringing that beautiful light and radiance with us, and that can then release some of the tension as well. So there's so many different things. And just quickly to Yasmin, how do you focus on what we need to or find out? How do you focus on what we need to or find out? That's the last one for you then, Tjoni, if that's okay.
Sure. This is really getting into more tools, and I feel like, you know, we do need to have a discussion really focusing on various tools. For me personally, you know, and the way I say we probably need a whole session on this is the spiral matrix, for instance, is the process that I've generated in order to be able to create these kinds of dialogues, so that, you know, for instance, if I'm working on a project, for example, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it, I will do an internal process to actually generate a dialogue with it as if it's another person, so that I can actually ask it what it needs from me right now. One of the other things that you can do is simply focus on what outcome you want. And when I say the outcome, I mean, again, coming back to the feeling. So if we think, well, what's the outcome from this situation I want? It doesn't have to be the details of the situation. How do I want to feel about the situation? Bring yourself back to the center and focus on how you want to feel in relation to that situation. And then simply ask your body or ask the ether, show me what's the next step that I need to take. So I feel like there's an infinite number of tools that we can do for this, but it would be quite a lengthy discussion to get into that. But yeah. I am definitely happy to get into that in another chat for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. So brilliant. Thank you so much. So thank you for everybody who's joined us. To Sue, Amina, Yasmin, thank you for your questions, and everybody else who's joined us. Well, a special thank you to Tjoni, who's Egypt at the minute. Which, by the way, guys, we've got a retreat coming up in March, the end of March, in Egypt. So you can have a look on MCG for any more information. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Ava. But finally, if I may, how can people find you and get in touch with you, Tjoni, if they need to? If you want them to. That's the question. Let me think. Ooh.
So probably the easiest way is there's my website, which is tjoni.com. That's TJONI.com, and that's for my more personal work, creative work, coaching work, that kind of thing. If you're interested in more of the community-based operations, then inspiral.org. Now this is still in nappies, and it's been in nappies for many, many years because I keep rebuilding it. But the basic core under the About Us section is succinct enough to have an idea of what we're generating creativity and collaborative business-wise. And that's www.in-spiral.org. So those are the two main ways to find me, and then from there you can find all of my various, you know, Instagrams and Facebooks and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for that, Eva.
Yeah, and you also YouTube. You've got your YouTube channel on the go as well.
Yeah, so YouTube is Tjoni, all one word, TJONIJ. So if you look for that, you'll find me on YouTube, definitely.
Loved it. Thank you so very much, Tjoni. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining us. Hopefully we're going to be back very soon. Again, may the unraveling continue. If Tjoni will go ahead, we'll figure the next one out. Hopefully people. Yeah, definitely.
Unraveling. So thank you so much, Colin, and thank you so much, Ava, for holding us together.
Thank you, everybody, and lots of love, and we'll see you all very soon. Take care. Have a beautiful day, morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be in this vastness of the cosmos.
No, Thank you so much. We don't have time. Just have a beautiful moment.
Yeah, that one. Thank you. Yeah, great then.